The Elder Scrolls v. Skyrim is a game with thousands of years of history behind it, a world with its own creation myths and religious conflicts and political struggles that span multiple eras. This isn't just a story about dragons returning or a civil war tearing apart a province. It's a story about prophecy and destiny, and what it means to be a hero when the world is ending. Understanding Skyrim's lore means understanding the deep history of Tamriel, the continent where the game takes place, and specifically the province of Skyrim, the homeland of the Nords. This is the entire lore of the Elder Scrolls v. Skyrim, from the creation of the world to the return of the dragons to the civil war threatening to destroy the land, told as completely as possible, while acknowledging that Elder Scrolls lore is vast and sometimes contradictory, depending on which in-game book you read or which character you talk to. Let's start at the very beginning. Before there was time, before there were mortals, in the era of the gods. In the beginning there was the void, and from the void came two primordial forces, Anu, who represented order and stasis, and Padome, who represented chaos and change. These two forces created the Aedra and the Daedra respectively, though this is an oversimplification because Elder Scrolls cosmology is deliberately complex and told from multiple conflicting perspectives. What matters for understanding Skyrim is that there are two types of divine beings, the Aedra, who sacrifice their power to create the mortal world of Nirn, and the Daedra, who refuse to participate in creation and instead rule over their own planes of oblivion. The Aedra are generally worshipped as the divines, the 9 gods of the imperial pantheon, while the Daedra are more complex, some being worshipped as gods by certain cultures while others are feared as demons. The creation of Nirn, the mortal world, was orchestrated by Lorcan, a trickster deity who convinced the Aedra to give up their divine power to create a world where mortals could exist. This act of creation cost the Aedra most of their power, leaving them as distant, weakened gods, and many of them felt betrayed by Lorcan for tricking them into mortality. The punishment for Lorcan was severe. His heart was torn from his body and shot across the continent, landing in what would become Red Mountain in Morrowind, and Lorcan himself was destroyed, though his influence would continue throughout history. The Nords of Skyrim know Lorcan as Shor, and they venerate him as their chief deity despite his fall, seeing him as the god who gave them the world of men even at great cost to himself. The first era of recorded history began with the establishment of mortal civilizations across Tamriel. The continent is divided into provinces, each home to different races with their own cultures and histories. Skyrim is the northernmost province, a harsh, frozen land that breeds hardy people. The Nords are descendants of humans who came from the continent of Atmora, far to the north, and they established themselves in Skyrim through conquest and settlement. The ancient Nords were a warrior culture, obsessed with honour and glory in battle, believing that those who died bravely in combat would be taken to Sovngarde, a Nordic afterlife where they would feast and fight eternally in the Hall of Valor presided over by Shor himself. But before the Nords claimed Skyrim, the land was home to the Falmer, or Snow Elves, an ancient elven civilization that built great cities and possessed advanced magic. The relationship between the arriving Nords and the native Falmer was initially one of coexistence, but it deteriorated into war. The turning point came with the Night of Tears, an event where the Falmer attacked the Nordic settlement of Sarthal, killing most of the inhabitants. The reasons for this attack are debated in lore, with some sources suggesting the Falmer were defending their territory, while others hint at deeper magical reasons involving an artifact of power buried beneath Sarthal. Regardless of the cause, The Night of Tears led to the Return, a genocidal campaign led by the Nordic hero Ysgramor and his 500 companions who sailed from Atmora and waged war against the Falmer across Skyrim. The war between Nords and Falmer lasted for generations and ended with the near extinction of the Snow Elves. The surviving Falmer fled underground and sought refuge with the Dwemer, another elven race known for their technological prowess and underground cities. The Dwemer agreed to shelter the Falmer, but at a terrible cost. They poisoned the Snow Elves with a toxic fungus that rendered them blind, and eventually devolved them into the twisted, blind, feral creatures that still inhabit the depths of Skyrim's ruins. The Falmer you encounter in Skyrim's dungeons are the descendants of the proud Snow Elf civilization, reduced to animalistic savagery over thousands of years. This is one of the great tragedies of Skyrim's history, a genocide followed by enslavement and corruption that destroyed an entire culture. The Dwemer themselves are another mystery central to Skyrim's lore. The Dwemer, or Deep Elves, were a race of elves who rejected the gods and instead pursued technology and reason. They built enormous underground cities filled with mechanical constructs and steam-powered machinery, cities that still function thousands of years after their builders disappeared. The Dwemer vanished suddenly and completely from Tamriel during the First Era, and no one knows exactly what happened to them. The prevailing theory is that they attempted to tap into the power of the heart of Lorcan, the divine artifact that had fallen in Red Mountain, and their experiments caused the entire race to disappear in an instant, possibly transcending mortality or being erased from existence entirely. Their ruins remain throughout Skyrim, filled with their mechanical guardians and the remnants of their lost civilization, serving as dungeons for the player to explore and mysteries for scholars to ponder. After the Nords established dominance in Skyrim, they organized themselves into a society ruled by the strong. The 500 companions who fought alongside Ysgramor became a legendary warrior order, and their traditions continued through the organization, known simply as the Companions, a group of Nord warriors who take contracts and uphold the ancient warrior traditions. The original Companions included warriors who made pacts with Daedric princes and beast spirits, and some became werewolves, a curse or gift that has been passed down through certain bloodlines of the Companions for thousands of years. The Companions in Skyrim's current era are based in Whiterun, and struggle with this werewolf heritage, with some members seeing it as a blessing that makes them stronger warriors, while others view it as a curse that needs to be purged. The worship of the Daedric princes is another crucial aspect of Skyrim's lore. The Daedra are powerful beings who rule over planes of oblivion, and each has their own sphere of influence and personality. They're neither good nor evil in a traditional sense, but rather alien intelligences with their own agendas that often conflict with mortal interests. In Skyrim, you encounter many Daedric princes through their quests. Azura, the Prince of Dawn and Dusk, who appears as a benevolent figure to the Dunmer people. Mehrunes Dagon, the Prince of Destruction and Revolution. Molag Bal, the Prince of Domination and Corruption. Sheogorath, the Prince of Madness, and many others. Each Daedric prince has shrines scattered throughout Skyrim, and they offer powerful artifacts to mortals who complete tasks for them, though these tasks often involve morally questionable acts. The Daedra cannot be killed in the traditional sense since they're immortal beings, but they can be banished from Nirn, or their influence can be limited. The relationship between mortals and Daedra is complex and varies by culture. The Nords generally view Daedra worship with suspicion, preferring to honour the divines, but individuals throughout Skyrim's history have made pacts with Daedric princes for power. The most relevant Daedric involvement in Skyrim's main story concerns Alduin and the dragons, but we need to understand dragons in Elder Scrolls lore before we can understand the prophecy that drives Skyrim's main quest. Dragons in the Elder Scrolls universe are not mere animals or even particularly intelligent beasts. Dragons are fragments of Akatosh, the dragon god of time, who is one of the chief Aedra in the Imperial Pantheon. Dragons are immortal beings who speak and think in the dragon language, Thu'um, which is not merely words but a form of reality-altering magic. When dragons speak, they're not just communicating, they're imposing their will upon reality itself. The Thu'um allows dragons to breathe fire, summon storms, slow time, and perform other incredible feats simply by speaking words of power in the dragon language. Dragons dominated Skyrim in ancient times, ruling over humans as gods and tyrants, demanding worship and tribute. The dragon cult was the religious and political structure through which dragons ruled, with human dragon priests serving as intermediaries between the dragons and mortal humans. The chief of all dragons was Alduin, known as the World Eater. Alduin is not just another dragon. He is the firstborn of Akatosh, a being prophesied to devour the world at the end of time. In Nordic mythology, Alduin represents the end of the current Kalpa, or cycle of time, after which a new world will be born. But Alduin grew proud and cruel in the ancient past, and rather than fulfilling his cosmic role as World Eater, he claimed dominion over mortals and ruled as a tyrant god-king. The ancient Nords eventually rebelled against the dragons and the dragon cult, led by heroes who learned to use the Thu'um themselves. Humans are not supposed to be able to use the Thu'um the way dragons do. It requires years or decades of meditation and training to learn even a single word of power. But 3 heroes emerged who mastered the Thu'um enough to challenge Alduin: Hakon One-Eye, Gormleth Golden Hilt, and Feldir the Old. These 3 heroes confronted Alduin at the throat of the world, the highest mountain in Skyrim and considered the most sacred site in Nord religion. They could not kill Alduin, since as a fragment of the god Akatosh he is essentially immortal, so instead they used an Elder Scroll, an artifact of immense power that exists outside normal time, to cast Alduin forward through time. They didn't defeat him, they simply removed him from their era, sending him forward to the 4th era, to the time when Skyrim's game takes place. This act saved the ancient Nords from Alduin's tyranny, but also ensured that eventually in the future he would return. The ancient Nords knew this, and they recorded prophecies about Alduin's return, prophecies that spoke of the last Dragonborn who would finally end Alduin's threat permanently. After the Dragon War ended and Alduin was cast through time, the remaining dragons were hunted and killed or went into hiding. The Blades, an organization of dragon slayers, formed to protect humanity from any remaining dragons and eventually evolved into the secret protectors of the Emperor. The dragon cult collapsed without the dragons to lead it, though some dragon priests sealed themselves away in tombs throughout Skyrim, magically preserved, waiting for the return of the dragons they served. The Thu'um was largely forgotten by humans, preserved only by the Greybeards, a monastic order who live in isolation at High Hrothgar, a monastery on the throat of the world. The Greybeards study the way of the voice, a philosophy that treats the Thu'um as a sacred gift to be used only for worship and meditation, rather than for violence or conquest. They live in silence except when training others in the voice, or speaking words of power, believing that the Thu'um is too powerful to use casually. The history of Skyrim continued through the First Era into the Second and Third Eras, marked by various wars and political changes. Skyrim became part of the Empire of Tamriel, a continent-spanning nation ruled from the imperial province of Cyrodiil. The empire brought relative peace and prosperity, but also required the Nordic people to submit to imperial authority and accept imperial religious practices. The imperial pantheon includes the 9 divines: Akatosh, Dibella, Arche, Zenithar, Mara, Stendar, Kinnereth, Julianos, and Talos. 8 of these gods are ancient Aedra who sacrificed themselves to create the world. But Talos is different, and this difference is at the heart of Skyrim's political conflict. Talos was originally a mortal man named Tiber Septim, who lived in the Second Era. Through a combination of military genius, political cunning, and possibly the use of reality-altering artifacts, Tiber Septim conquered all of Tamriel and established the Third Empire. After his death, he was worshipped as a god, achieving apotheosis through either divine ascension or through the faith of his worshippers, literally making him divine, depending on which theological interpretation you accept. The Nords particularly revere Talos because Tiber Septim was a Nord, one of their own who became a god through will and might, embodying Nordic values of strength and conquest. Talos worship became central to Nordic identity, with shrines to Talos in every major city, and his name invoked alongside the other divines. The Third Era ended with the Oblivion Crisis, an event chronicled in the Elder Scrolls The Fall, Oblivion. The Daedric prince Mehrunes Dagon attempted to invade Tamriel by opening gates to his plane of oblivion across the continent. The crisis was resolved through the sacrifice of Martin Septim, the last heir of the Septim dynasty, who transformed into an avatar of Akatosh and defeated Mehrunes Dagon before turning to stone. This event ended the Septim bloodline and threw the empire into chaos as various claimants fought for the vacant throne. Eventually, Titus Medioan seized power and established a new dynasty, but the empire was weakened and never fully recovered from the Oblivion Crisis. Into this weakened empire came the Aldmeri Dominion, a supremacist alliance of high elves from Somerset Isle who believe that elves are superior to humans and that the mortal world is a prison from which they must escape. The Aldmeri Dominion spent years building its strength before launching a surprise invasion of the Empire in what became known as the Great War. The war was devastating, with the Dominion capturing the Imperial City itself before the Empire could marshal its forces for a counterattack. The war ended with the White Gold Concordat, a treaty heavily favourable to the Dominion that required the Empire to make significant concessions. The most controversial of these concessions was the banning of Talos worship throughout the Empire. The Thalmor, the ruling government of the Aldmeri Dominion, insisted on the ban of Talos worship not just for theological reasons, but as a political move to weaken the Empire. By forcing the Empire to ban worship of a god that Nords hold sacred, the Thalmor created resentment and division within the Empire's territories. The theological argument the Thalmor make is that Talos cannot be a god because mortals cannot achieve divinity, that apotheosis is impossible, and therefore Talos worship is heresy. But the real goal is to destabilize the Empire by attacking its cultural foundations. The ban on Talos worship is the primary grievance that leads to Skyrim's civil war. The civil war begins when Ulfric Stormcloak, the Jarl of Windhelm, kills High King Torrig in single combat. The circumstances of this duel are disputed. Ulfric claims it was a legal challenge for leadership following ancient Nord tradition, while the Empire claims it was murder. What makes the duel particularly controversial is that Ulfric used the Thu'um, the voice of the dragons, to defeat Torrig. Ulfric is one of the few mortals alive who's been trained in the Thu'um, having studied with the Greybeards before leaving to fight in the Great War. His use of the voice in combat breaks the way of the voice that the Greybeards preach, treating the Thuum as a weapon rather than a sacred tool for meditation, but it also demonstrates power and strength in a way that appeals to traditional Nord values. After killing Torrig, Ulfric declared Skyrim's independence from the Empire and called for the Nordic people to follow him in rebellion against imperial rule. His primary stated goal is to free Skyrim from the Empire that betrayed Nordic values by banning Talos worship, but his motivations are more complex. Ulfric is ambitious and wants to be High King himself. He's a Nord nationalist who believes Skyrim should be ruled by Nords for Nords, and he's deeply traumatized by his experiences in the Great War, where he was captured and possibly broken by Thalmor interrogators. The war split Skyrim in half, with some Jarls supporting Ulfric's Stormcloaks and others remaining loyal to the Empire under General Tullius. This is the political situation into which the player character is thrust at the beginning of Skyrim. You are a prisoner being transported to your execution at Helgen, captured while trying to cross the border into Skyrim. You're about to be executed alongside Ulfric's Stormcloak and other prisoners when a dragon attacks. This dragon is Alduin, returned from his journey through time, arriving at the exact moment of the prophecy's fulfillment. Alduin's return marks the beginning of the end times according to Nordic prophecy, and his first act is to destroy Helgen, killing Imperial soldiers and Stormcloaks alike. In the chaos you escape and your adventure begins. The player character is the last Dragonborn, though you don't immediately know this. A Dragonborn is a mortal blessed by Akatosh with the soul of a dragon. This blessing has appeared throughout history in certain individuals, most famously in the Septim dynasty, whose members were all Dragonborn. Being Dragonborn grants you the ability to absorb the souls of dead dragons, permanently killing them so they cannot return to life, and to learn and use the Thuum instinctively without years of training. When a dragon dies, their body burns away and their soul is released, and a Dragonborn can absorb that soul, taking the dragon's knowledge and power. This is the only way to truly kill a dragon. Otherwise they can eventually resurrect by having another dragon speak their name in the dragon language, calling their soul back to the world. After escaping Helgen, you make your way to Whiterun, one of Skyrim's major cities, where Jarl Balgruuf is dealing with reports of a dragon attacking the Western Watchtower. You help defend the Watchtower and kill the dragon, and this is when you discover you're Dragonborn because you automatically absorb the dragon's soul. The guards witness this and word spreads quickly. The Greybeards, who live in isolation at High Hrothgar, sense the use of the Thuum and call out to you with their voice, summoning you to their monastery. The entire province hears the Greybeards' call, a thunderous shout that echoes across Skyrim, and everyone knows that a Dragonborn has appeared. You travel to High Hrothgar to meet the Greybeards, who test you and confirm that you are indeed Dragonborn. The Greybeards are led by Master Arngeir, who speaks for the others since the other Greybeards are so powerful that their normal speaking voices can accidentally use the Thuum and cause destruction. There is also Paarthurnax, though you don't meet him initially. The Greybeards train you in the basics of the Thuum and send you on tasks to prove your understanding of the way of the voice. They're conflicted about you because while they recognize you as Dragonborn and must train you, they also see that you will use the Thuum for violence, which goes against their philosophy. They reluctantly accept that you are needed to stop Alduin, even if it means violating the way of the voice. The Greybeards eventually send you to meet their leader, Paarthurnax, who lives at the very summit of the throat of the world. Here you discover that Paarthurnax is himself a dragon. one who betrayed Alduin in ancient times and taught humans how to use the Thu'um, enabling the ancient Nord heroes to resist dragon rule. Paarthurnax has spent thousands of years meditating and struggling against his draconic nature, because dragons are inherently domineering and cruel, and fighting against his nature is a constant battle. Paarthurnax explains that Alduin has returned and is raising other dragons from their burial mounds across Skyrim, building an army to reclaim dominion over the world. But Alduin is not fulfilling his destiny as the World Eater who brings the end of time. Instead, he wants to rule over mortals again as he did in ancient days. This is a perversion of Alduin's cosmic purpose, and it's why he must be stopped. To defeat Alduin, you need to learn Dragonrend, a shout that was created specifically to fight dragons. Dragonrend is unique because it expresses concepts that are alien to dragons: mortality, finitude, death. Dragons are immortal and exist outside normal time, so when Dragonrend is shouted at them, it forces them to comprehend mortality, and temporarily makes them vulnerable, and grounds them if they're flying. The ancient Nord heroes created Dragonrend and used it against Alduin, and the knowledge of this shout is contained in an Elder Scroll. Elder Scrolls are artifacts of immense power that exist outside normal time and causality. They contain prophecy and knowledge, but reading them can blind mortals or drive them mad. They also have a tendency to disappear and reappear in different places as needed by fate. You must find the Elder Scroll that contains knowledge of Dragonrend. This quest takes you to the Dwemer ruins of Blackreach, an enormous underground city that spans beneath much of Skyrim, a testament to the lost Dwemer civilization. The scale of Blackreach is staggering, with massive caverns containing entire fungal forests and Dwemer architecture that still functions after thousands of years. You retrieve the Elder Scroll from the Tower of Emzark, a Dwemer structure that contains a machine specifically built to store and read Elder Scrolls. With the Elder Scroll in hand, you return to the throat of the world, to the Time Wound, a scar in reality left by the ancient hero's use of the Elder Scroll to cast Alduin through time. At the Time Wound, you use the Elder Scroll to look back through time and witness the ancient battle between the heroes and Alduin. You see Harkon, Gormleth and Feldir use Dragonrend on Alduin, and then use the Elder Scroll to cast him forward through time. By witnessing this event, you learn the Dragonrend shout, the knowledge literally passing from the ancient heroes through time to you. This is Elder Scrolls lore at its most timewimey and metaphysical, but it works within the internal logic of the setting where prophecy and time are flexible, and Elder Scrolls exist outside normal causality. Armed with Dragonrend, you can now challenge Alduin. You confront him at the throat of the world, and after a battle where you use Dragonrend to bring him down, Alduin is wounded and flees to Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife. Alduin is feeding on the souls of dead Nords in Sovngarde to regain his strength, perverting the Hall of Valor, and preventing worthy warriors from reaching their eternal reward. To follow him, you must travel to Sovngarde yourself, which requires entering through a portal at Skuldafn, an ancient Nordic temple that can only be accessed by flying on Dragonback. This is where the alliance with Paarthurnax and potentially other dragons becomes important. You capture a dragon named Odaviing by trapping him in Dragon's Reach, the palace in Whiterun that was originally built to hold dragons. Through conversation with Odaviing, you learn more about dragon society and their loyalty to Alduin, though Odaviing also expresses some respect for you as a fellow Dove, as dragons call themselves. You convince or force Odaviing to fly you to Skuldafn, and he agrees, curious to see if you can truly defeat Alduin. At Skuldafn you fight through Draugr and dragons to reach the portal to Sovngarde. Draugr are undead Nordic warriors who guard ancient tombs, animated by ancient magic and still carrying out their duties thousands of years after death. The dragon priests you encounter in various Nordic ruins are more powerful Draugr, who are the mortal servants of dragons, still wearing their masks of office and wielding powerful magic. At Skuldafn, you face one of these dragon priests before entering the portal to Sovngarde. Sovngarde is the Nordic afterlife, a realm of eternal valor where the sky is filled with the aurora and the Hall of Valor stands waiting for worthy warriors. But Alduin has corrupted this place, surrounding it with a dark mist that feeds on souls. You meet the shades of ancient heroes, including the 3 who originally defeated Alduin, and they agree to help you face the World Eater one final time. Together you battle Alduin in Sovngarde, using Dragonren to ground him and the combined might of multiple heroes to wound him. When you finally strike the killing blow, Alduin doesn't dissolve into a dragon soul that you can absorb. Instead, his body disintegrates and he's simply gone, and it's unclear whether you've truly killed him or merely defeated him temporarily. Soon, the Nordic god who guards the Whalebone Bridge entrance to the Hall of Valor suggests that Alduin may return someday to fulfill his true purpose as World Eater. But for now, the immediate threat is ended. With Alduin defeated, you return to Skyrim as a hero. The Greybeards honour you, Paarthurnax speaks of your achievement, and the prophecy of the last Dragonborn is fulfilled. But Skyrim's troubles are far from over, because the civil war still rages and dragons still exist in the world. This brings us to another major questline, the Blades, and their conflict with Paarthurnax. The Blades were an ancient order of dragon slayers, who later became the secret protectors of the Dragonborn emperors. During the Oblivion Crisis and the fall of the Septim Dynasty, the Blades were nearly wiped out by the Thalmor, who saw them as a threat. Only a few Blades survived, including Delphine and Esbern, who you encounter during the main quest. The Blades help you uncover information about Alduin's return and provide crucial support, but they also have a dogmatic hatred of all dragons. When they discover that Paarthurnax is a dragon living at the throat of the world, they demand you kill him as proof of your loyalty to the Blades and to ensure no dragon lives to potentially threaten humanity. This creates one of Skyrim's most significant moral choices. Paarthurnax betrayed Alduin thousands of years ago, taught humans to use the Thuum, and has spent millennia meditating and fighting his violent nature. He helps you defeat Alduin and offers wisdom about the nature of dragons and power. But he is still a dragon, and he admits that his draconic nature constantly pushes him toward domination and cruelty, that his goodness is a choice he must make every day against his fundamental nature. The Blades argue that his past crimes, the humans he killed and ate during the Dragon War, can never be forgiven, and that trusting a dragon is foolishness. They demand you kill him. The Greybeards, meanwhile, refuse to support you if you kill their leader, seeing it as a betrayal of the one who made your victory possible. The game allows you to make this choice, and there's no clear right answer. If you kill Paarthurnax, you satisfy the Blades, but lose the support of the Greybeards and kill someone who's been nothing but helpful. If you spare Paarthurnax, the Blades refuse to work with you further, and you leave a potentially dangerous dragon alive. This moral ambiguity is characteristic of Skyrim's better moments, where the game doesn't tell you what's right, but instead presents competing values and lets you decide. The Civil War questline runs parallel to the main quest. and involves choosing to support either the Imperial Legion under General Tullius or the Stormcloaks under Ulfric Stormcloak. This choice is complicated, and neither side is clearly right. The Empire represents order, unity, and tradition, but they've compromised Nordic values by banning Talos worship and are seen as weak for submitting to the Thalmor. The Stormcloaks represent freedom, Nordic pride, and resistance to oppression, but they're also xenophobic. Ulfric is ambitious and potentially ruthless, and their rebellion weakens the Empire against the Thalmor threat. The Thalmor actively support the civil war continuing because a divided empire is easier to defeat than a united one, and they've been manipulating events to keep the conflict going without either side achieving decisive victory. If you support the Empire, you help General Tullius put down the rebellion, eventually capturing Windhelm and forcing Ulfric to surrender or die. If you support the Stormcloaks, you help Ulfric conquer Solitude and drive the Empire out of Skyrim, making Ulfric the new High King of an independent Skyrim. Either outcome has consequences. An Imperial victory maintains unity, but does nothing to address the grievances that caused the rebellion, while a Stormcloak victory gives Skyrim independence, but leaves it isolated against the Thalmor threat. The game doesn't tell you which choice is correct, and fans still debate which faction is right years after the game's release. Beyond the main quest and civil war, Skyrim is filled with faction questlines that add depth to the world. The Companions, based in Whiterun, are the descendants of Isgramor's 500 companions and continue the Nordic warrior tradition. Their questline involves investigating a conspiracy within the organisation and dealing with a werewolf curse that affects the upper ranks of the Companions. You eventually become Harbinger, the leader of the Companions, and can choose whether to cure the werewolf curse or embrace it. The College of Winterhold is Skyrim's institution for magical learning, though it's viewed with suspicion by most Nords who distrust magic. The college questline involves investigating the activities of the Thalmor agent Ancano, who's attempting to harness the power of the Eye of Magnus, an artifact of unknown origin with immense magical power. You eventually become Archmage of the college and stop Ancano's plot, though the nature and origin of the Eye of Magnus remains mysterious. The Thieves' Guild in Riften is a criminal organisation that has fallen on hard times, suffering from bad luck and dwindling membership. Their questline reveals that the guild's misfortunes are tied to a broken oath to Nocturnal, the Daedric Prince of Night and Luck, made by a former guild master who betrayed the organisation. You restore the guild's fortune by restoring their relationship with Nocturnal, and can become Guildmaster, returning the Thieves' Guild to its former power. The Dark Brotherhood is Skyrim's guild of assassins, serving Sithis, the Void, through their unholy matron, the Night Mother. The Dark Brotherhood questline is one of Skyrim's darkest, involving contracts to murder various targets across Skyrim. The questline culminates in an attempt on Emperor Titus Mede the Sin's life, ordered by mysterious forces seeking to destabilize the Empire. You can choose to complete the assassination or betray and destroy the Dark Brotherhood, one of the few faction questlines where you can choose to work against the faction rather than joining it. Each of these factions adds layers to Skyrim's world and explores different aspects of its culture and conflicts. The Companions represent traditional Nord warrior values and the struggle against bestial curses. The college represents the pursuit of magical knowledge and the dangers of power without wisdom. The Thieves' Guild represents the criminal underworld and the concept of luck and fate. The Dark Brotherhood represents the darkest aspects of mortality and the worship of death itself. The Daedric quests scattered throughout Skyrim add another dimension to the lore. Each Daedric prince has their own quest that explores their sphere of influence and personality. Zura's quest involves investigating a vision and uncovering the fate of the Dwemer through the exploration of the Dwemer ruin of Mzulft and the artifact Azura's star. Moleg, Bal's quest is one of the most disturbing, requiring you to participate in the corruption and domination of a priest. Sheogorath's quest is simultaneously hilarious and unsettling, taking you into the mind of a dead emperor and showcasing the Prince of Madness's unpredictable nature. These quests reinforce that the Daedric princes are not simply evil, they're alien beings with their own logic and morality that often conflict with mortal understanding. The concept of Chim is an advanced Elder Scrolls lore concept that appears in various texts throughout Skyrim and other games. Chim is a state of enlightenment where an individual realizes that reality is a dream, and they are part of that dream, but maintains their sense of self despite this realization. Achieving Chim grants the individual the ability to alter reality itself, essentially becoming a lucid dreamer in the dream of the universe. Tiber Septim supposedly achieved Chim, which may explain his apotheosis into Talos. Vivek, a living god from Morrowind, also achieved Chim. The concept is deliberately obtuse and metaphysical, part of the deeper lore that the Elder Scrolls series uses to explore philosophical questions about reality, consciousness, and divinity. The Dwemer disappearance connects to this deeper metaphysics. According to some theories, the Dwemer attempted to achieve a collective version of Chim by tapping into the heart of Lorcan and using a device called the Numidium. Instead of achieving enlightenment, they may have failed the test and zero-summed, a state where you realize you're part of a dream but lose your sense of self and cease to exist. Or they may have succeeded in transcending reality entirely, existing now in some state beyond mortal comprehension. The truth is deliberately left ambiguous, part of the mystery that makes the Dwemer fascinating. The various holds of Skyrim each have their own political situations and cultures that reflect the broader conflicts tearing the province apart. Whiterun, located in the centre of Skyrim, tries to remain neutral in the civil war initially, with Jarl Balgruuf refusing to take sides until forced to do so. The city is prosperous and represents traditional Nordic values of honour and hospitality. Windhelm, Ulfric's capital, is a city deeply divided, with the Nord population living in relative comfort, while Dunmer refugees from Morrowind are confined to the Grey Quarter, a slum where they face discrimination and poverty. This highlights the xenophobia within the Stormcloak movement, as Ulfric claims to fight for freedom but allows systematic oppression within his own city. The Argonians, lizard people from Black Marsh, aren't even allowed inside the city walls and must live on the docks. Markarth is perhaps the most troubled city in Skyrim, built into ancient Dwemer ruins and controlled by the Silverblood family, corrupt merchants who own the mines and essentially run the city as their personal fiefdom. Markarth is the centre of the Forsworn conflict, the insurgency by the native Bretons of the Reach who call themselves Forsworn, and use a combination of guerrilla tactics and Daedric magic to resist Nordic rule. The Forsworn claim that the Reach should be independent, that the Nords are occupiers who conquered their land. The conflict is brutal, with the Forsworn resorting to terrorism, while the Nords respond with oppression and collective punishment. The questline involving the Forsworn reveals corruption within Markarth's government, where the Silverbloods use the conflict to maintain power and eliminate rivals. Solitude, the capital of Skyrim and the seat of the Imperial presence, is sophisticated and prosperous, benefiting from trade with the Empire. It's ruled by Jarl Elisif, the widow of High King Torrig, who serves as a figurehead while General Tullius handles military matters. Solitude represents the imperial vision of Skyrim, connected to a larger civilization and benefiting from that connection, but also compromised by imperial policies like the ban on Talos worship. Riften is the most corrupt city, controlled by the Thieves' Guild and the Blackbriar family, who use their wealth and connections to Maven Blackbriar to operate above the law. The city's guard is ineffective and corrupt, and the Jarl is weak, making Riften a haven for criminals, but also a place where ordinary citizens suffer from crime and exploitation. The guilds and organizations of Skyrim reveal different aspects of its culture and history. The Bard's College in Solitude preserves Nordic traditions of poetry and song, which in Nord culture isn't just entertainment, but a way of recording history and honouring heroes. The Bard's College questline involves recovering ancient instruments and artifacts, including King Olaf's verse, a satirical poem that reveals uncomfortable truths about a legendary king. This touches on how history is recorded and revised, how legends are created, and how official narratives sometimes erase uncomfortable facts. The dragons you encounter throughout Skyrim each have their own personalities and histories, revealed through dialogue if you speak their language. Many dragons you fight are loyal to Alduin out of fear or tradition, seeing him as their rightful leader. But some dragons are more independent-minded, and your interactions with them reveal dragon culture and philosophy. Dragons measure time differently than mortals, thinking in terms of ages rather than years. They see mortals as ephemeral and insignificant, and the idea of serving or even respecting mortals is alien to most dragons. This makes Parthenax's character even more remarkable, as he's fought against this fundamental draconic worldview for millennia. The way of the voice taught by the Greybeards represents a philosophical approach to power and its use. The Greybeards believe that the Thu'um is a gift from Kine, the Nordic goddess of the sky, and should be used only for worship and meditation. They believe that using the voice for violence or personal gain is a corruption of its sacred purpose. This philosophy is tested by your character, who must use the voice for violence to defeat Alduin, and by the existence of Ulfric Stormcloak, who studied with the Greybeards but uses the Thu'um for personal ambition. The conflict between the Greybeards' pacifist philosophy and the practical need for power to defeat evil is never fully resolved, reflecting real-world tensions between idealistic principles and pragmatic necessity. The lore of the Thu'um itself is fascinating. Each shout is composed of 3 words in the dragon language, with each word adding power to the effect. Learning a word of power requires finding it written on a word wall, ancient Nordic structures where the words were inscribed during the Dragon War. But simply knowing the word isn't enough. You must understand its meaning, which for mortals requires years of meditation, but for a Dragonborn happens through absorbing dragon souls. The dragon language isn't arbitrary sounds, it's the language of creation itself, the language Akatosh used to speak reality into being. When a dragon speaks fire, they're not casting a spell, they're speaking a fundamental truth about fire into existence. This is why the Thu'um is so powerful, and why dragons are so dangerous. The prophecy of the last Dragonborn appears in the Elder Scroll Red at the beginning of the game's main quest, though you don't see the full text unless you read the book. The prophecy speaks of Alduin's return and the appearance of a Dragonborn who will stand against him. But prophecy in Elder Scrolls lore is complicated because time is not strictly linear in this universe. Prophecies can be self-fulfilling, as the act of reading a prophecy can cause it to come true. Elder Scrolls themselves exist outside time and contain knowledge of multiple possible futures, which is why reading them can drive people mad. their minds unable to process information from timelines that may or may not come to pass. The concept of mantling is another advanced lore concept relevant to Skyrim. Mantling is when an individual walks in the footsteps of a divine being so completely that they become that being, literally replacing them in the cosmic order. This may be what happened with Tiber Septim becoming Talos. He mantled Lorcan by conquering Tamriel and creating an empire just as Lorcan created the mortal world. The player character might be mantling a heroic archetype, becoming the Dragonborn of prophecy by fulfilling the role so completely that you become inseparable from it. The Sheogorath you meet in Skyrim is heavily implied to be the player character from Oblivion, who mantled Sheogorath by taking on the role of the Daedric Prince of Madness in that game's expansion, literally becoming the new Sheogorath. The pantheon of deities in Skyrim reflects the complex religious landscape of Tamriel. The imperial pantheon recognizes 9 divines, but the Nordic tradition has its own names for these gods. Akatosh is Alduin or the dragon, Dibella is Dibella, Arkay is Orkay, Zenithar is Tun, Mara is Mara, Stendar is Stuan, Kinnereth is Kine, Julianos is Junal, and Talos is Izmir. The Nords also worship Shor, Lorcan, as their primary deity, the god who gave them the world even at the cost of his own life. This difference in pantheons reflects cultural differences, with the imperial version being more orderly and civilized, while the Nordic version emphasizes warrior virtues and connection to the land. The Thalmor represent the primary antagonistic force in Skyrim's political landscape, even though you don't fight them directly in the main quest. The Thalmor are high elven supremacists who believe that the mortal world is a prison created by Lorcan's trick, and they seek to unmake reality itself by destroying the towers, mystical structures that anchor reality. If they destroy enough towers, they believe reality will collapse and the elves will return to their original divine state. This is a genocidal philosophy that requires the extinction or subjugation of humanity, which is why the Thalmor are unambiguously villainous despite their sophisticated presentation. The ban on Talos worship is part of this larger plan, as Talos is one of the towers holding reality together. By eliminating belief in Talos, they weaken his existence and potentially destabilize reality itself. The various ruins scattered across Skyrim tell stories of the past. Nordic barrows contain Draugr and treasure, but they also contain information about the dragon cult and the dragon war. Each barrow was built to house a dragon priest and their retainers, with the Draugr being former cultists who willingly became undead to continue serving their priest in death. The architecture of these barrows, with their puzzle doors and trap-filled corridors, suggests that they were designed both as tombs and as tests, perhaps intended to ensure that only the worthy could reach the treasures and power within. The word walls found in many barrows suggest they were also places of learning, where the ancient Nords trained in the Thuum. Dwemer ruins tell a different story, one of a civilization that rejected the gods and pursued rational understanding of reality. The automatons that guard Dwemer ruins, the dwarven spheres and centurions and spiders, are not magical constructs but mechanical creations powered by steam and soul gems. The Dwemer discovered how to trap souls in gems and use them as power sources, technology that modern mages still use for enchanting. The complexity of Dwemer architecture, with its massive gears and pistons and pipes, suggests a civilization with engineering knowledge far beyond anything modern Tamriel possesses. The fact that these machines still function thousands of years after their creators disappeared speaks to the sophistication of Dwemer craftsmanship. Falmer ruins, usually found in the deepest parts of Dwemer constructions, show the tragedy of the Snow Elves' fall. The Falmer have lost all traces of their former civilization, living as blind primitives in the dark. They're hostile to all surface dwellers and have become the monsters the Nords once falsely accused them of being. Yet occasionally you find evidence of their former glory, such as in the Forgotten Vale, where ancient snow elf architecture still stands, and where you can meet Knight Paladin Gelibor, one of the last snow elves who hasn't been corrupted. Gelibor's story reveals that some snow elves resisted the Dwemer and maintained their culture, but they're vanishingly rare. The Founders' Fate is a cautionary tale about cultural destruction and the consequences of desperation. The dragons you encounter serve Alduin for various reasons that reveal dragon culture. Some serve out of fear, knowing Alduin is the firstborn of Akatosh and the strongest of their kind. Some serve out of tradition, believing that dragons are meant to rule mortals and that Alduin represents the natural order. Some serve reluctantly, aware that Alduin has gone rogue from his cosmic purpose, but unable to oppose him. And some, like Paarthurnax and eventually Odaviing, recognize that Alduin's tyranny is wrong and choose different paths. The dragon Durnavir, encountered in the Dawnguard DLC, is trapped in the Soul Cairn and offers a different perspective, having been separated from dragon society for so long that he's developed his own philosophy. The concept of souls in Elder Scrolls lore is crucial to understanding several game mechanics. Souls are real, tangible things that can be trapped, consumed, or manipulated. Soul gems trap souls and can be used to enchant items or recharge enchanted weapons. Black soul gems can trap human souls, which is considered an abomination but is more powerful than animal souls. When you absorb a dragon soul, you're literally consuming their essence, taking their knowledge and power into yourself. This is why dragons fear the Dragonborn, because you represent permanent death for them, something they've never had to face before. The various standing stones scattered across Skyrim represent the constellations and offer blessings that enhance different abilities. These stones connect to the astrological traditions of Tamriel, where the stars and constellations are believed to influence fate and grant power. The standing stones are ancient, predating current civilizations, suggesting they were erected by an earlier culture that understood the connection between the stars and power. The mechanics of how they work are never explained, but they seem to tap into cosmic forces that exist beyond mortal understanding. The flora and fauna of Skyrim create an ecosystem that feels real, despite being in a fantasy world. The game includes dozens of plant species that can be harvested for alchemical ingredients, and the combinations of ingredients create potions with predictable effects. This alchemy system implies that the natural world operates according to consistent principles, that plants and animal parts have inherent magical properties that can be discovered and exploited, the existence of creatures like Spriggans, nature spirits that protect forests and hag-ravens, women transformed into bird-like witches through dark magic, adds mythological elements to what could otherwise be a mundane natural world. The prevalence of bandits and wild animals makes Skyrim a dangerous place even without dragons and Daedra. The roads are not safe, and travellers must be prepared to fight at any moment. This reflects the political instability caused by the Civil War as lawlessness spreads and bandits become more bold. It also reflects the harsh climate and terrain of Skyrim, where survival requires strength and vigilance. The Nords have been shaped by this environment, becoming tough and self-reliant, because weakness means death in Skyrim's unforgiving wilderness. The DLC expansions add significant lore to Skyrim's world. Dawnguard introduces the Volkiar vampires, an ancient vampire clan led by Lord Harkon, who seeks to use the Elder Scroll to permanently blot out the sun, creating eternal night for vampires to rule. This expansion explores vampire culture and introduces Serana, a vampire princess who becomes one of the game's most developed companions. The expansion also introduces the Dawn Guard, vampire hunters who use crossbows and specialized equipment to fight the undead. The conflict between Harkon's nihilistic vision and the Dawn Guard's mission to protect humanity offers another perspective on power and its corruption. Dragonborn DLC takes you to Solstheim, an island that was once part of Skyrim but now belongs to Morrowind. The expansion introduces Miraak, the first Dragonborn, a dragon priest who served the dragons thousands of years ago but rebelled and attempted to claim power for himself. Miraak was defeated by the dragons and imprisoned in Apocrypha, the realm of Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric prince of knowledge and fate. Miraak has been trapped there for millennia, and he sees your appearance as the last Dragonborn as an opportunity to escape. The conflict with Miraak explores what a Dragonborn becomes when they use their power selfishly rather than to protect others. Miraak represents what you could become if you let power corrupt you. Hermaeus Mora himself is fascinating, a Daedric prince who appears as a mass of tentacles and eyes, representing forbidden knowledge and the dangers of seeking to know too much. Apocrypha, his realm, is an infinite library containing all knowledge that exists or could exist, but the knowledge comes at a price. Those who seek Hermaeus Mora's wisdom often lose themselves in the pursuit, becoming servants of the prince, or going mad from knowledge their minds can't process. The Skal, a Nord tribe on Solstheim who worship nature rather than the traditional pantheon, resist Hermaeus Mora because they understand that some knowledge is too dangerous to pursue. The law of Skyrim extends to its economy and social structures. The Jarls rule their holds with significant autonomy, owing allegiance to the High King but maintaining their own armies and laws. This decentralized system makes Skyrim vulnerable to civil war because there's no strong central authority to enforce unity. The guild system provides alternative power structures, with the Thieves' Guild, Dark Brotherhood, Companions, and College all operating semi-independently of official government. This creates a complex web of competing loyalties and interests that enriches the political landscape. The racial tensions in Skyrim reflect real-world issues of immigration, prejudice, and cultural conflict. The Nords see Skyrim as their homeland and resent the presence of other races, particularly Dunmer refugees and Argonians. The Dunmer came to Skyrim after the eruption of Red Mountain destroyed much of Morrowind, and they've struggled to integrate into Nord society. The Argonians face even worse discrimination, seen as little better than animals by many Nords. The Khajiit, cat people from elsewhere, aren't even allowed in cities and must trade from caravans outside the walls. These prejudices are often justified by Nords as necessary security measures or cultural preservation, but they reflect deeper xenophobia and fear of the other. The role of the Empire in Skyrim is complex because the Empire has been both oppressor and protector. The Empire brought peace and prosperity for generations, allowing trade and cultural exchange across Tamriel. But the Empire also imposed its religion and laws on the Nords, eroding traditional Nordic culture. The current Empire, weakened by the Great War and forced to sign the White Gold Concordat, represents both the security of unity and the shame of defeat. Supporting the Empire means accepting these compromises, while supporting the Stormcloaks means risking isolation and continued conflict. The various books scattered throughout Skyrim contain enormous amounts of lore, from historical accounts to philosophical treatises to technical manuals. Some books are consistent across the Elder Scrolls series, appearing in multiple games and building a coherent historical record. Others contradict each other, reflecting that in universe, different authors have different perspectives and biases. Reading the books isn't necessary to understand Skyrim's main story, but it adds immense depth for players who engage with it. You can learn about the Oblivion Crisis, the history of the Blades, the nature of Daedric princes, the principles of magic, and countless other topics simply by reading books you find. The magic system in Skyrim reflects the lore of how magic works in Tamriel. Magic is drawn from Aetherius, the realm of magic and spirits that exists alongside Nirn. Magicka flows from Aetherius through the sun and stars, which are actually holes in reality torn by the Aedra when they escaped after creating Nirn. Mages use this magicka to cast spells, bending reality according to their will. Different schools of magic represent different approaches. Destruction uses raw magicka as energy. Restoration channels healing energies. Conjuration summons creatures from oblivion. Illusion affects minds. Alteration changes physical properties, and enchanting binds magic into objects. The existence of these distinct schools suggests that magic operates according to consistent principles that can be studied and mastered. The shouts you learn throughout the game each tell a story about dragon culture and philosophy. Unrelenting Force, the first shout you learn, embodies the raw power of a dragon's will. Fire Breath represents destruction and domination. Whirlwind Sprint embodies speed and swiftness. Dragon Rend, the shout that teaches mortality to dragons, is heretical from a dragon perspective because it expresses concepts that are alien to their immortal nature. Each shout has 3 words, and learning all 3 words makes the shout more powerful, reflecting how deeper understanding of a concept grants greater power over it. The main story of Skyrim, when you step back and look at it as a whole, is about the end of an age and the transition to something new. Alduin's return signals the end times, but by defeating him, you're not stopping the end of the world, you're postponing it. The civil war, regardless of who wins, will change Skyrim forever. The ban on Talos worship has already changed the religious landscape. The rise of the Thalmor threatens the entire continent. Everything is in flux, and your character stands at the centre of these world-shaking events, making choices that will determine what comes next. But the game doesn't pretend that your choices will fix everything, because the problems are too deep and too complex for any one hero to solve. You can defeat Alduin, but dragons still exist. You can end the civil war, but the wounds will take generations to heal. You can defeat Harkon or Mirak, but other threats will emerge. This is the entire lore of the Elder Scrolls V. Skyrim, from the creation of the world by the Aedra and Daedra to the return of Alduin the World Eater, from the ancient conflict between Nords and Falmer to the modern civil war tearing Skyrim apart, from the nature of the Dragonborn to the prophecies that foretold your coming. It's a story about power and its corruption, about tradition versus progress, about the costs of freedom and the price of security. It's a story about gods and mortals and the blurred lines between them, about how history shapes the present and how prophecy can be both fulfilled and subverted. Most of all, it's a story about a world in transition, where the old ways are dying and something new is being born, and where you, as the last Dragonborn, stand at the centre of it all, your choices echoing through history even as you struggle to understand what those choices mean. The lore of Skyrim is vast and deep, filled with mysteries that may never be fully explained and contradictions that enrich rather than diminish the world. This is what makes it endure, this sense that there's always more to discover, more to understand, more depth beneath the surface waiting to be explored.